So for step 8, checking the RC equipment. Well, this is where we need to hook up the battery, the speed controller, receiver, and servo, turn everything on, and make sure that the servo is in neutral before we attach all of the servo saver pieces. So I'm going to hook everything up, and then we'll take a look at this, and then I'll show you about the screws too, because you're going to want to make sure that you have the right one for your servo. So I'll set this up and let's check if the servo is in neutral. Okay, so I've got everything connected. We've got our battery, we've got our ESC, the servo, the receiver, and our transmitter. So I'm going to turn the transmitter on. And we are going to grab, or I'm going to grab the on-off switch here, and our servo. Now, this time around, I'm using an SU300 digital servo. Because this is the one I was able to find this time around. I usually use the S148 or the 303 or 304, but we're going to use this SU300, which actually is supposed to be a direct replacement to the S148, and the 148s are going to become non-existent soon. So, I'm going to give it a shot. So, as you can see, the servo splines there are visible. So when I flick this switch, you should see the servo do a shimmy, and it'll shimmy into neutral if this works correctly. So here we go. There we go. Now that was very small, which means this was pretty much in the neutral position right away. So if you take another look, I'm going to push the button. Yeah, it didn't move that time because it's actually in neutral. And because this is a digital servo, it doesn't do the shimmy the same as the old S148s. I can feel something inside the servo move, but it's not moving. Not visibly anyway. So I now know that this is in neutral. So I will disconnect everything and we will continue to install all of the servo saver pieces. So before we can put this together, we need to figure out what screw we're going to need for the servo. Well, the servo horn that came with the servo itself is this one. And the screw that I ended up screwing out of this is this one, which is a small, very small tapping screw. So on this chart, you can see that if it's a tapping screw, just follow it along. Is it thicker or is it thinner? It was a thinner one. So if it's the thin one, it's a BA7. And in the Tamiya kit, guess what? There's your BA7 screw right there. So we've got our BA7 and the ball connectors. So I've got all the pieces here that we need for this, so I'll set it up and we'll put this together. So first off, you can see that with this piece here, there are going to be two ball connectors. So I think we'll install those first. So I'm going to turn this around because I'm left-handed. So if we do this, same idea, you can see that the screws are going to come in from the other side. So I'm going to start screwing that in. And I like this because using this, you can see that I can more or less get it level as I'm screwing it in. And I can get this going in correctly. So let's keep turning that in. And with this, I'm just going to go all the way. And because this is the hard plastic, I'm also not going to over tighten. Once I'm at the end, we'll call it done. So same thing again on the other side. We're going to need to do the same thing. I'm more or less going to try and level this out as I push this in. And that needs to be tilted just a bit more. Nope, that's good. Okay, so we will screw this all the way in. And I'm just checking now and making sure that they actually are all the way, which they are. So there are the two ball connectors on that piece there. So what do we got to do? Well, if we grab our servo and notice that the cable is coming out from that side, sometimes they show it curling around, so just making sure that it's the right way. You can see that we have this piece that's got to go on. Then we've got this, and I'm going to snap that one on just like that right away. And then you can see that that is going to fit on like that. So you can see that that is going to fit inside of there. So again, it's going to look like that when it's finished. So let's just snap that on. There we go. So there it is in place. Well, that one fell out. That's okay, because we don't need to worry about that too much. So then we've got the little guy, and you would end up screwing that whole thing in. Now, the one thing that I will show you is that you can see here in the diagram that you want this up and level. Well, it's also going to be dependent upon the back side of this. You see the grooves, and because this is a Futaba, I can use this piece because it even says Futaba Tamiya. So either way, this is the correct one. We want this to be facing, and you can see that on this side it's facing down. So this needs to be facing down. Now the question will be, where's the best placement? So you can see that if I turn it over that way, it's too far to the right. If I turn it over that way, it's too far to the left. So if I can get this evenly on the tines, that's the closest right there. So I can take this one, and that's just going to fit on like that, as you can see. So if that's the closest, we're going to take that P1 piece, the little piece right there, and now we're going to use that BA7 screw, and we're going to screw this into place. Now, at the same, I'm going to basically start it, if I can here. I'll show you what I'm going to do. Now, I'll start this, but I know that that was neutral. So I want to make sure that my thumb is on this to try and stop the servo from moving. So basically I'm pushing back as I'm screwing it in, because if we know that that was the neutral position, I don't want it moving when we're doing this. There we go. I think I can screw that in just a bit more. Yep. That's in all the way. So it's in. Now you'll notice it's slightly off. That's okay, because when we've got this all connected, we can use the trims on the transmitter to move this a little bit. So if I wanted to level this out, you could. And in fact, I might even just do it by hand. Oh no, we'll leave that for when we do the trimming with the transmitter, because ultimately that is the correct placement. It's just going to sit a little bit leaning left, you could say. So that is done, which means that step 8 is done, because it's all about setting that servo to neutral and getting the servo saver in place. So with step 8 complete, we're going to move on to step 9, and we're going to attach the steering rods.